Welcome to Florentine. We're not here to fight with two swords. You're in the wrong place. My name is Glen. I'm a warlord out of the wetlands, which is in East Texas.
I'm Vansen.
Collister, I'm a warlord out of Rising Wind.
Starting out, I'm going to talk a little bit about some concepts. We talked about this a little bit yesterday, but they are definitely worth repeating now that we have these swords. So, first thing I want to talk about is lanes and your centerline. Two swords. If I am fighting someone, let me actually fight you guys because that way you can see it. Right? And I'm going to start with a terrible stance, but really illustrate the point. Right? I now have two outside lanes. My outside lane here, because that puts my weapon between their weapon. I have an outside lane over here, and they have a great big stabbing the chest center lane. So one thing we're going to want to do is we are going to want to try and guard that center line. In Florentine, there's always this tension between the concepts, would I rather get stabbed or chopped in the arm? Right? You can't cover both. You're like, I've got my outside lanes protected. You're going to get stabbed. You're like, I've got my inside lanes protected. Well, now I've got at least one outside lane still open. So you always have to be aware of that. There is no guard that lets you cover everything, because that guard is called Giant Shield. So you're going to want to be aware of that. There is no right and wrong. There are wrongs. There's not only one right answer, but there are also a bunch of wrong answers. Our card, what do you do with your hands? It's almost kind of a running joke in, at least in Texas, about Florentine. Hands are too low. The reason for that is when we are fighting our opponent, and there are different guard styles. Right? Some are right, some are more right, and some are really wrong. Really wrong. But when you are fighting an opponent, right, their point of approach is their shoulder, right? That's where his sword attaches to his arm, or his arm attaches to his body, and his sword attaches to his arm. So if he, or if I can hit him in the shoulder, right? Belly, right? Definitely in the leg. The shin is like, what, 2 feet out of range, right? And you can adjust that by getting shorter, but then also notice my shoulder comes down, right? So the shoulder is the point of closest approach. Right? You're looking at getting your hand at their shoulder height, because that blocks their shots at the point that they can reach most easily. So my hand's down here, now he can start slapping through the arm. So that's why this kind of running joke is your hands are too low. Because if I aggress him like this, arm. If I aggress him like this, then immediately he can go under, but then that's farther away from you, so he needs more time to react. For our defense, we have really two things we have. We have obviously weapons to block with, but we also have not being there. We talk about that as distance equals time. Because if something's further away, it takes longer for you to hit it, so I have more time to react. So I want the thing that I have the least time to react, especially because I am god-awful slow myself, right? I want that to be protected, and I want him to have to swing at the open things that are further away, so I have time for my slow reflexes to actually get there. What is a good guard? So, I've been actually all three of us probably but my guard is to, first of all, close the center line, right? And it depends on what I'm fighting. Usually it's a righty boardman, because that's what bell, dag, and half guard, the main style is, right? So, I close my center lane, I've got a sword over here, and I'm going to fight this pine cone here, right? So, close my center lane, and then I put my other hand up here to block out my outside lane, right? They're not crossed, because then they can just jam one weapon and stuff me out. But I've got one here, I've got one here, and they're both about with their shoulder height. So I'm fighting a really short person, fighting a really tall person, right? No one's that tall, thank God. But I've got them about here. And what this does is it does make this arm look very open. So if I put you, and here you're like, oh, I can hit that arm. So especially if they're like, oh, I'm a righty, I want to swing right from the high cross. Right? So a block for that's it. So that is one variation of guard.
Yeah, I'm actually pretty similar to that. I mean, I may not point to someone's shoulder. So, I'm usually blocking the center lane. One thing that I'll look at with my right hand is instead of protruding it, I may cheat it back a little bit, trying to get someone to swing inside on my left arm just to bait that, right? Because then I can just readjust back and then step and counter with this.
So switch back to guard again. Notice center lane guard, right here, right? Still guarding center lane. That's something you're going to find in common with almost every guard.
So my guard is much similar to yours, one out, protruding. The reason I think, and Bella guards is, most people when they cross, there is an easy reaction to it. The counter is to go straight, cross them, and hit them right in the arm. So this, like you said, is the most common guard. It makes easy what your return is. You have a simple return for this guard, so it kind of helps down when you have to do this.
So I also want to talk briefly about the body mechanics of those blocks, because like you notice, we're all big tall dudes, right? So our blocks are out here a little bit more flat because we have the strength to hold this arm up. If you do not have as much strength, particularly for women, you've got half the other strength of a man, the equivalent size, right? And you tend to be shorter too. So what you want to do is you just want to bring this back a little bit so that your forearm is pointing the direction the shot's going to move down. Because this becomes a very strong motion, right? This motion is weak, but you're pushing up against it strong. Any questions? Yes.
When you're doing this here, which side you're dominant?
So my right hand is going to be in my center lane. My left hand's over here, and the reason for that is they're almost always righties, right? So they have a sword here. Because if I come over here, then their sword is over here, and all I've done is put my guard away from their weapon. Good question. We're not going to adjust you to our guard. We're going to adjust you to the guard you have, right? Because as you saw, 3 different styles. There's another style which Peter the Quick, right over there, uses a lot, right? And his style is very much here, right? And so this is guarding center lane. This is guarding his arm. And so he's like this, or from the front, looks like this. Right? I actually switch this guard a lot if I'm fighting other Florentine or I've armed them, because this becomes very effective for blocking them off to one side of my body. So usually I've taken their right arm, because that's what they swung at me with. So I blocked, riposted, taken their arm, and now I can step in. They're going to throw some with their left hand, block, strike. So this is we call it the Peter the Quick, or Rogue 1.5 guard. Next, we'll talk about a little bit about weapon selection. Talk a little bit more about how that impacts our guard. Does everybody here have weapons that are either the same length or really, really close to the same length? Yeah. All right. Anybody have different length weapons? All right, great. I am a big believer that Florentine is about hitting people with 2 weapons. And to do that, you want to have your weapons be the same length, because otherwise they can fight you one weapon at a time. So double length or equal length weapon is going to be generally superior time. You want to be able to strike with both weapons at the same time. So several of you, especially if you're using a style like this, where you've got your hands up, your guards here, notice I squared my shoulders. Right? In every other style, we're like, don't square your shoulders, it's terrible idea. And that's because you generally have sword and board. You've got a blocky thing and a striky thing, right? And so you want to get one shoulder back, because you can't hit with the shield, right? For you, you're fighting here, you've got one shoulder back, so there's no advantage of bringing this arm forward. But with Florentine, you can hit with both arms. So there's an advantage to having both arms in striking range. Now, Peter's guard down here does have this hand back, right? And you don't have equal striking range. Peter gets away with that because 1, he's tall. 2, good. 3, he's mobile, so there's a lot of stepping, which then brings that arm back into range. But I have found that in general, it's good to have both hands kind of squared up there.
Yeah, I wanted to make a comment about the blade length. Yeah. So some people, if you're feeling like your left hand isn't where it needs to be, of course, sparring single sword left hand is going to be helpful. But one thing that I did in my training was, hey, I'm just going to pop a longer sword in my left hand and a shorter sword in my right hand to discourage my right hand from being able to do anything. Because I'm saying, hey, I can hit with this sword. If you feel like you need to do that, that's an example of in an intentional training scenario, if you want to just activate that left hand and use your right as a passive block so you can get more comfortable with your left hand, that's an option that I found successful.
Biggest thing with guards, the only thing I'll say is make sure you get your guard low. Like even when I was setting up a lot of the guards, like you said, real low, that opens you up versus here. A lot of it you're going to be fighting more for the most part unless you're fighting just keeping your guard up is going to be one of your number 1 elements, because if people throw to the side, they have to commit. The lower your arms are, the less they have to commit to it.
Actually, you can go back to something about your guard. Face. But notice that his swords are somewhat crossed, but they're not tying each other up, right? That's when you really have to be careful. A lot of people, especially they start trying to do the guard I was talking about, I call it Road 2.0, but they're here. This is just trouble, right? This sword now, I can reach over it, but it's really not very useful. So it's very important, like mine's here, this sword can get over here, this sword's still free, I haven't tied up my weapons. I'm not here, I'm here. And so it's very important, especially when you're adapting your sword style, to make sure that you're not tying up your weapons. Another kind of side note about when you're training Florentine especially, I went through this. If you start rebuilding your style, maybe you start to get some serious, like, oh, I want to change to this guard, you're going to get murdered a lot. I went through this. But that's the thing you kind of have to be aware of if you're starting to make fighting changes. That's often if people come back from SKBC and they've got some new tricks that work, but then they also, because they're trying new stuff, are failing, right? That's because you're learning new things, right? So don't expect you're going to take these new ideas and they're going to all magically improve it. If you're doing, especially anything fundamental or really foundational with your changes, you're going to have a lot of losing before you get back up to winning. But the advantage of doing that is instead of being capped out here, sure, you go down to here, but now your cap is up here. Single sword is your future, right? As a Florentiner, you're going to get armed a lot, right? So it becomes very important to learn how to fight with a single sword. You mentioned this just a moment ago, single sword and ditching. When I do a single sword ditch, I didn't actually do it yesterday because I was sore, but I will switch hands almost every round. Like this is the left hand round, and this is the right hand round, and I'll just swap off. And I do that because I could just do only offhand rounds, but I do like winning, and I get sad if I lose all the time. So I will switch it up, right? And that is a really good way to, without a lot of extra effort, get a lot of practice in with your offhand. But just accept the fact that you're going to spend a lot of time armed as a Florentine. And if you can be a very effective single sword fighter and learn to kind of overcome when you've been armed, it will really help stop your fighting and also make Florentine more fun. Gender differences. This one's pretty cool. I talked a little bit before. It's going to be about what you block, right? You have to have a little bit more serious blocks if you are smaller, if you are female, or if you're playing a game like like Velogarth or Dagger, where they maybe club you with heavier weapons, or if you go to SCA where they club you with much heavier weapons, right? You definitely have to have better body mechanics for blocks. If I'm blocking something to the side, I can't just be like, I've got to get to here, right? Again, notice my forearm is directly against the axis of travel, or the direction of travel. If they're bringing something down, I can't be here, I have to be here, because notice again, put my forearm against the direction of travel. These become very strong blocks. Blocks where you're pushing away from your body, whichever direction you're going, are going to be very strong. Blocks where you're basically slapping away from you, this motion, this is a very weak motion, right? Your shoulder adductors and abductors are way weaker than your pecs, right?
When you're blocking, what I do want to add is with Florentine, a lot of people think when you get swing in the block, the arms are protruding as the block come in, you bring it to your body. It's not bringing it all the way to your body, it's firming your It's not, because a lot of people when you swing, they bring their sword into their body. You got to remember, if you bring your sword here, you then have to travel that stage. So it's firming the block, like you said, to keep it, because in Velogarth, for example, the throw the long way, and then the return. Bringing it, you want to keep it to get away from your sword directly. What ends up happening is, the more you do it, this is where your guard ends up becoming resting, and then as you're blocking, you're getting hit on you. So, like I said, sometimes you'll have it out. Remember, it's firm the block, it's not bring it to your body.
Good. Question. I generally don't do a lot of rotating in my body. That does vary from person to person, but if I'm setting a block, say over here, my block's just going to go, oh, there's a shot coming. Set, right? Didn't really rotate. There may be a little tiny bit, but it's not really much. It's not intentional. So I block, come back. Because even if I come back here, I don't have to rotate. Because the problem with rotating is now I've now changed the person I'm fighting from here to here, right? And that then opens me up to step over here.
Which is what people are more than likely trying to do, especially as a Florentine. They're trying to get you to turn your body and then bring your swords to the beat to type your swords. If you firm to here, bring it out block, makes it easier to return, which is threatening to that. Versus if you turn, like you said, the light's down here, and you open up your
Power, right? In addition to, so So with blocking, also striking, you've got two hands. You also generally have an offhand. How many people here are right-handed? How many people are left-handed? All right, I can tell because you're smarter than me. So if you are right-handed, your left hand is going to be weaker and less coordinated. If you're left-handed, you're right-handed. And unfortunately, as a lefty, Florentine's harder for lefties. And the reason for that is your less coordinated hand, if you're fighting a boardman, you also will be, is against their stronger defense. The hand that doesn't need any help is already good. So you're like, oh, this side's got the easy route, and it's my good hand, which makes it much harder to train your offhand. If you're a righty, you've got a nice balance because your hand that's got more coordination is going against their strong defense. Your hand that needs a little bit of a boost is going against their weak defense, going against their sword side. So it's a little bit harder for lefties to pick up forward. So power generation becomes really important. They talked about the fundamental class, so I'm not going to talk about this a lot. For what we do in Amtgard and Bellendag and sort of stick fighting games, there are two main power generation metrics. There's like 12 actual ones in martial arts. So if you want to know, find Shadow. He's like a 10th degree black belt, and he can teach you all the other ones. But for what we're doing, there's a rotational one, which is Wanda Rusi actually is pretty good one. But you're driving off the ball of your foot, using your leg muscle to activate. You are linking your hips and shoulders locked in one place. You do not want to break this kinematic link or you'll lose all the power from your legs. So you're using your obliques and your torso muscles to just maintain this link. So it's this motion. And then for your shots, if I'm coming in from the side and doing this, doing that, anything that's got something coming from the side, right? I am then going to use my pecs to bring my arm forward, right? I'm not using my traps, my triceps, or my biceps to do anything except put my arm in space where it needs to be to hit the person, right? A good way to practice this, which my wife started doing many years ago, now she's a great fighter, but she still does it, is to punch your husband, right? Or your partner. But I'm the husband. And because the same thing you do to throw a jab, right, is going to be basically that same motion of a chop, right? Or for that matter, a wrap. And those are great for any shot. If I'm going to be shot this way, drive off this foot. Again, rotate, right? But now I'm using whatever the muscles in my back. One muscle I don't remember. But to extend my arm, my tricep is not generating any power. It's just extending my arm in space where it needs to be to land the shot. Here. Right? So chops, chops. The other one is if I want to do a vertical shot, and this is how you can get clean slots without having to worry about bopping people in the face. Because if you try to use a rotational motion for a straight down chop, notice it's moving in space diagonally. So to get a straight chop, if I'm doing rotational power, my sword has to go this way so it cancels out into a straight chop, which is hard, which is why people get the face a little bit. So instead, for your power generation, you want to move a weight shift where your weight goes forward, you're coming down, right? That makes a nice powerful shot. And now I'm not using my triceps or anything except to put my arm in space and extend my arm. I'm using my lats to pull my arm down. I'm using my weight shift with that motion in, and that makes it quick. This also allows you to throw shots pretty hard with very little space very quickly. Okay. I should be able, from here, to land a powerful shot. If I just use my wrist, that's it. If I use my full body, that's my full body. Right? Notice, just a very short thing, nice, loud, crisp pop. Okay? And that's because of the body mechanics. And that becomes really important because that's how a lot of good fighters look fast. Some of them are actually fast, but they can all look fast because they just threw a shot that was this far, not this far. Questions?
Quick, I want to add, if you notice with the body mechanics portion of it, it's not a real big move. It's not over exaggerated motion. It's here, going to quick. A lot of when you're fighting, you're going to think when it's to create that shot, you have to do a lot of big motion, twisting, where in reality, from the ground up, it's one quick shot, even if it's here. It doesn't need to be having big motion. A lot of people get caught into trying to generate power. They have to come all the way from the ground. Like you said, blood through here, quick and deliver straight to where you're going.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Not an overexaggeration. When you're practicing, when you first do it, you'll be hard sinking the muscles, you'll be all like, right? But what you're looking to do is focus on that short motion. And notice also I didn't have to wind up. My sword tip does come back a little bit because my hand comes down, the center passes here and it does that. But there's no chambering, right? I just throw. Let's go to blocking because that's really important. because if you are shorter than us, or shorter than the person you're fighting for that matter, you are going to have to block some stuff before you can hit them. They will have range. And if you are taller than your opponent, they may close on you and throw shots, you have to block anyway. Blocking is really important, right? That's how you win. One of the things you want to be especially aware of as a Florentiner is where the shot is going to come from after you do something. Right? Because if I throw a shot, say my guard is here, right, and I throw this shot, what's likely going to happen? Yeah, shot with my arm. Right? If I move, right, I come from here and I goes into my opponent to here, right? What's he likely going to do? Take that side shot. Take that side shot. So you always want to be aware of what you've made open, because something's always open. There is no safety. Right? So knowing what's open makes it easier to block that. Right? If I tell you what shot I'm going to throw and say, hey, I'm going to throw a shot to your left forearm, block it, much easier than I'm like, hey, right? So that's going to be one of our first things when we throw shots or when we block is think about what we may need to block. Next thing, do very limited cross-body blocking. If a shot's coming over here, I should not do this, right? Most of the time, right? The reason we might be able to cross-body, this arm just threw a shot. I was like, ha! And he chops at this arm, and I can't get this one back in time because I've overcommitted. Then this is okay, right? But in general, if I throw a shot with this hand, I should still be able to block with this hand. If a shot comes over here, I should be able to block with this hand. When people cross, that's when they start getting into trouble. So block the appropriate side. Next thing is after you block, you can offer a post. Because if your hands are near the center line, which means you probably have control of the center lane, they probably haven't thrown to the center lane, they've probably thrown something to the outside. So outside. Right? He is outside and I can block, which I didn't, but he's awesome. But I can block and I can chop like that. So it's block or post, right? If he throws with his left hand, again, block or post, right? So he's being aware of what I can throw by bringing his hand over to the guard, and I'm going, oh, here's an opening, I can cross. But I can also do the same hand. So same shot again. Right? The advantage of doing this is I didn't open up, because he might be like, fine, I'm not left-handed anyway, and I know you are, so I go, ha, ha, shot. Right? Whereas if I did it with my right hand blocking, here, shot, this hand's still guarding my center lane onto but dying. Because the worst scenario is, for me, is he throws that shot, I block, he stabs me, or hits me in the torso. In other words, kills me, and I've traded an arm for a death. So that is definitely a thing we want to do, or want to avoid rather. And when we can avoid that is, if this hand blocks, usually if I blocked him outside, I can riposte with that hand on the cross. You have two swords, block with both. There's a very common thing in Florentine to see someone who is, especially if they're, whatever hand they are, like if they're right-handed, this is the hand they hit with, this hand they block with. They just brought a crappy shield. Make sure you're throwing shots with both hands. The example you had a moment ago of using a short sword in your offhand and a regular leg sword in your dominant hand is a great training technique, because it doesn't have the disadvantage of a single sword that you don't get to practice blocking with your dominant hand, but you get to still use both weapons. And a lot of times, it's actually throwing blocks with your dominant hand that's the harder thing. You're like, oh, I can block with my offhand, and I practice throwing shots with my offhand. Have you practiced blocking with your dominant hand? Right? That is often a weakness of Florentine, right? And that is a critical weakness, especially if you have to close range. It's more important to be able to learn to block effectively with your dominant hand than throw shots with your offhand if you have to close range. If you're really tall, you can do it the other order. You can learn to throw shots with your offhand first, then learn to block. Right? Obviously, you both, but focus on one first.
Yeah, one thing, there's kind of two concepts that I want to call back to. One was the time aspect, and for blocking, one thing you want to consider is usually you have like that lead hand and the back hand. Sometimes I like to intentionally cheat that back hand to bait someone to swing at that quadrant, right? Because it's back, I'm pretty confident that I have a little bit more time to respond to my opponent throwing to that quadrant. You can use that to your advantage as you marry that with this concept of, okay, well, now I can block and in return, assuming my opponent isn't covering what's open, right? And I'm getting them to reach further for an area that I'm already prepared to block and counter, right? So I'm increasing my odds of just being successful on my return. The second thing I wanted to call attention to, we already went through the guard. I I would encourage everyone to stand in front of the mirror and really ask yourself, with my guard that I'm comfortable with, what's open and what isn't. Not that the openings are a bad thing, but you want to be aware of your openings, because chances are your opponent likely have a higher chance of swinging towards those openings, and you can build that into your game. That can be intentional. You're increasing the likelihood of someone swinging somewhere you want to based on your guard. If you stand in front of the mirror and you're not sure, or you're like, hey guys, I don't really know, we can help with that. We can do the fight cards or go to pods and ask those questions. Say, hey, this is what's comfortable for me. You know, can we workshop this? Understanding that really builds a strong fundamental for your style. So I encourage it.
That's a great one. In fact, after the event, if you're like at home and you're like, oh, I forgot to do that, right? Take a picture, short video. I don't think you watch a 30-minute video in front of your
Flexing.
Right? Yeah, flexing. You're like, oh, look at my muscles here. Suck it, Glen. The forms are tiny. But I'm happy to do that and give you some feedback. I do that pretty regularly. People around the country I've worked with in the past message me like, hey, I've got a question about fighting. I'm happy to answer.
The one thing I was going to say, this is specifically if you're fighting board. Remember with what Glen said, you block and riposte. If they're fighting board, remember that they only have one specific movement they can do damage to. So when you block, understand that they have to now defend against two different things. So this goes back into, you have two swords, swing with both, block with both. Understand that when you block and riposte, if they're just doing board, they're threatened by two different areas. And it kind of culminates where you, if you use both hands, you then create more danger for them.
All right, so who here has heard of the drill block strike? Who here has done the drill block strike? Excellent. So what is the point of the block strike?
Reading and blocking.
What's that?
Reading and blocking.
Right. Yeah. It's called block strike because the block's the important part. You're not trying to hit your opponent. You are trying to block your opponent's shots. And the way we do this, we'll see if everybody's been doing it right, is you start uncomfortably close to your opponent. You don't start back here, right? Despite the fact we both have a lot of reach, we start about here, right? Enough that this is for a little bit less than a short sword length. Some people do short sword length, but I think that's too far apart. A little bit less, right? And we're tall. You're both short, closer.
Why do you think it's too far apart? What's that? Why do you think it's too far apart?
So the reason it's too far apart is you want it to be as close and awkward as possible because that forces you to read it. You don't have time to consciously see it coming. It needs to be a subconscious thing. It's called chunking. It's a way of subconsciously processing data in larger chunks so that you can process it more quickly. It happens actually in everything. It's in chess, it's in every sport. It's a very common thing. And there's no like way to specifically train it. You have to put yourself in a situation where you have to develop it and then do it in the course. So that's why we do it so close. Science. So block strike. You pick two targets on opposite sides of the body. I have learned the hard way: never pick opposite hip. But so we will pick, say, back shoulder, forearm, or arm, and then we will trade shots. Now, let's just do so back body, forearm, you may begin. Good. So notice when we did that, my guard was not back here. I wasn't doing this. My guard was projected out in space, and his was too. And notice we were going very quick, and we got most of the blocks. Right? One. But two, that projection in space makes so our blocks are from here to here, not here to here to here. Right? If we do that again, same targets. Actually, I pulled my arm away. But when I came back, right, over here is fine because this is kind of where my arm is because I'm not very flexible. But everyone over here, I didn't block any of that, right? Because I had to go here to here. It took me a long time to block those shots. So we block out. We block with enough bend in our arm, we can still throw shots. So we don't want to be fully straight arm because then we can't throw shots. Right? Without just using our wrist, which is bad. So enough bend, but far out. So what we're going to do is we're going to pair out. Final note about block strike, is you cycle through the hands. The person whose idea it was gets to switch first. So you usually do a minute. If you've got really good cardio, you can do 2 minutes hand, and then you switch. And then you do same targets, and then he would switch, same targets, then I would switch, same targets. So we do all combinations, the way to work your hands. And it's also a great way to critique people's blocks. Right behind you. So there was a question asked about fatigue, right? Especially if you're holding your swords up here, you've never done it before, even with a light amp card sword, eventually you're holding your arm out. You do this long enough, you're gonna be like, I can do this forever. 5 minutes later, you'll be like, oh my God, why is my hand so heavy? I need to get lighter gloves, right? So, if you do a lot of Florentine, especially if your guard is up at a height, right, you start getting tired. You start getting tired up here in whatever the shoulder muscles are called. I just call them shoulders. And if you're standing here, which is mainly a fencing thing, you'll get tired of this muscle here. So the question was, what can I do to strengthen that shoulder muscle? And the answer is resistance training, right? Going to the gym and lifting weights. Going to the gym and lifting weights is one of the best things you can do for your fighting, right? It is ridiculously effective, right? If you're already a guy who's pretty jacked or a woman who's pretty jacked, then you're obviously resistance training, so you're already done. But if you're not, this is a great way to build up endurance, build up strength, so you can throw quicker, tighter shots. It reduces injury. Resistance training is amazing. It reduces osteoporosis when you get older. Like, there's so many reasons. Go work out. But the specific exercise you can do for your shoulders. You go to the gym, they'll have a whole bunch of dumbbells. Dumbbells are little short weights with a little weight on each end and a handle in the middle. And you pick a light weight to start with. Always start lifting, go up, right? And since you're trying to build some endurance, you're looking at about 12 to 15 repetitions per set. Do 3-4 sets with maybe 90 seconds rest in between, right? I'm not a physical trainer. This is my experience from working with physical trainers. If you talk to a physical trainer and they tell you something different, they're probably right. But here is my experience with physical trainers, right? Whatever. And so what we're looking to do is you are looking to do 2 specific exercises, because there's actually 3 different muscles in the shoulder that for different motions. So you do a forward raise, and the way you do all exercises, the concentric, when you're clenching the muscle, should be quick, right? It doesn't have to be explosive, but it should be quick. The eccentric, when you're lowering the weight, in other words, you're giving into the resistance, should be slow and controlled. Right? When you go to the gym, we'll see a lot of people who'll be like, they'll do the bench press, they'll be like, huh, 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 huh. The eccentric is more effective than the concentric, so that down motion, say on the bench press, is more effective than the up motion. They're giving up more than half their gains. And they're probably taking steroids too. Why are they giving up half their gains?
That's not true.
They're probably not steroids. Only about half people let my picture here. Thank you. But in any case, so up, down, slow. Up, down, slow. And what you're looking for with your weight selection, right, after I do, I usually do 2 and I alternate hands. There is some research that says if you do both hands at the same time, you can actually lift more. There's like 20% increase in strength, effective strength when you use both hands because of the neuromuscular connection. But again, I'm not a physical therapist and I didn't read that whole paper. I got distracted. So I'm a research scientist, so I read a lot of research papers. So when I want to know something, I go read research papers. What we're looking for with that weightlifting, though, is going to failure. The gym is the one place where failing is correct.
Yes.
Right? School, bad. Gym, good. So if I'm doing, say, 12 reps, rep 11 should be like, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. Without the screaming, probably, right? Internally do that, right? And then you lower it, right? And rep 12 should be, okay, that's all I got, right? If you get all 12 done, you're like, 12, done. Go up and wait, right? You should always be going to failure, right? And failure is actually not when you think you fail, because the research says you usually have about 3, sometimes as many as 5 reps in reserve when you are, think you're going to fail. It's until you're actually like, oh, come on, arm. Why can't my arm do okay? Right? That's failure. Right? So there's front, and then there's to the side. Right? That will be good for strengthening the arm you use to hold this up.
I want to add to that.
Yeah.
For somebody who had their shoulder basically fixed, another reason why you don't want to do weights is for me, we do advanced.
Yes.
I do my workouts. You can get them. They're red, blue, yellow. They're I think they're 5, 10, 15, 20. One of the things I did, because like I said, my shoulder out, I broke my shoulder bone, and I had to start from the ground up. One of the things you can do instead of weights, you can get a band, and you can pull them straight up. Do the same thing. The other thing is you can do bands out, or you do them like this, that band will simulate weights if you don't have weights available. So for me, that was what I did because I was doing a lot of it at home. I don't have a gym at home. So that was another way to do it. They have them basically at any pretty good store. They're very
You can get them on
inexpensive.
Amazon super cheap.
Yeah, you can get them. They're super cheap. And these will basically do the equivalent of weights if you don't have the ability to get to weights on a regular basis. For me, I do them all the time. Weirdly enough, Braun is doing it right now. Braun has one. That's
Honestly, if you're not even, don't even worry about weight. Just doing the resistance.
It's almost as if
help you
that's
out a ton.
really good advice.
So I'm just saying that's one of the things is a band will help you if you don't have the ability to get to weights.
Yeah.
But weight training is, I weight train regularly now, but weight training is the best. Bands is another good way of doing it. But you can do it in between. I do it when I wake up, when I'm walking around, when I'm not doing anything else.
Finally, about resistance training, it's when the muscle's at most stretch that you get the most benefit. So don't cheat it down because, like, if I'm pulling up, right, this is the most stretch of that muscle, right? If you're only going to here and then coming back up, this bottom part is the most effective, right? Whatever motion you're doing where that muscle is most stretched out, I'm doing bicep curls, my bicep muscle. When my bicep is straight is when it's got the most strain, so that's when I get the most, it's called hypertrophy, but the most muscle activation, I'll get the most muscle gains. So always make sure you're going all the way as deep as as that exercise calls for. So now we're talking about movement, right? Notice we haven't even gotten the shots yet, right? But we are going to get the shots. So movement. When I am moving with my Florentine, it is important to notice how that's going to change my guard and what is open. So if I am here, right, same stuff's open. If I just move normally, right, nothing's changed, right? I do have to make sure, I don't know if you caught it, but just watch it again on the video, when I step, my hands bobble, right? That is a common mistake people make, right? Their guard comes down when they step, especially if they start moving quickly, right? So it's very important that we are aware of that if we do it. Ideally, we don't want to do it. But then if we start transitioning our feet, right? If I go from here to here, I don't want to just leave that guard because now I've got a problem, right? My guard is shifted because my torso shifted. So when we're cross-stepping, if we're changing our stance, we need to make sure that we're aware of that, right? And I actually, if I'm cross-stepping and bringing my other leg forward, I actually shift my guard a little more in this direction because when this comes available to people, they're more likely to swing at it. So my guard may be here, I'm now centered right on you, right? I come in, now I'm centered right next to you, right? And that is because as I bring it forward, people are likely to throw at it, right? If they're in range. Because it's now become available and it looks like a juicy target. So when we move, that becomes really important. So that's part one.
So my game often is about just fighting someone's forward hand. It's the closest target. So one thing that I really love to do is just lateral step. Are you going to get to that, or I don't want to?
We are, but you're great to start.
Yeah. So if I'm fighting Glen's front hand here, so he's kind of got them neutral. But say I'm going to choose this one.
Okay, I can go to
Yeah.
front hand.
So if I'm staying in line with his hand, I'm hitting his hand, but just a slight step to the outside, I'm not necessarily getting closer to him, right? I'm just shifting over, but I now have a lane right on that floor. So that's something that I highly recommend experimenting with because you're not putting yourself in additional safety or danger because now I can get stabbed. I mean, my whole torso is available as a target area, and actually I'm still jammed out here, right? Just a minor step, bobbing and weaving can open up an outside lane.
Go back to that real quick. What I want to notice, if you notice, it's one simple movement. For the footwork, it's one as simple as one step to the right, do it. You don't have to do very sweeping motions to create the angles to improve the shot you're going. I think a lot of people think with footwork you have to do a huge step here. It's as simple as I'm going to take one step here, you then open that lane.
So on that idea of movement too, is you do not want to hang out in your opponent's range. Even if you have the same range, you don't want to do that because then you've surrendered the initiative. At any point, they can take the initiative. So, like if I'm fighting him and he's about my reach roughly, right? I'm going to hang out here because he can't hit me. You know, if I do my arm, I guess then if I put him all the way out, he can. But also he's leaning, right? This is okay to hang out, but I do have to be aware of the fact that I'm still in combat. If he can take a very small step and then hit me in the arm, or a slightly bigger step and hit me in the body. But once I get to here, Once I get to here, we are engaged because my arm is fully in there and I am close enough with my body that a slight motion at all within his range can hit me in the torso. I have now engaged. I do not want to hang out here, right? Because I have reduced my ability to set up attacks. I've given him the ability to take control of the fight and take the initiative at any moment. I don't want to do that. This is especially common when one opponent is shorter than the other, because the shorter opponent is like, it's so hard to get in range. Once I get in what I think is range, I'm going to stay there. And what I've noticed a lot of time is the person is not in their range. They are just out of their range because I have tried to get the range to my perfect range, which is just outside theirs. But it's closer, so they're like, this is good enough for me, right? When they should be like, nope, not working, and get out, right? So that is going to be a very important part of our movement. So let's now talk about how we close, right? If I need to get in range on him and I have less reach, I might have less reach. Yeah, I have less reach. So if I want to get in, I have to be aware of the fact that he's probably going to try to hit me as I close. Right? So I've got my guard, I'm up here. If I just come straight in, nothing's changed, right? I haven't adapted my guard, but my openings have shifted because the angles have changed. Right? It's easy for him now to come up over my guard. Whereas we're at range, he can't come over my guard because at full extension is when he can hit me. But as I get closer, he can come over my guard. So there's this tendency to be like, oh, I'm going to close, I'll just block out, right? Yeah, the problem is that if you're like, oh, I'm going to block out, you're going to get shanked on, right? And getting stabbed sucks. So, how do we solve that problem? If we have to close, and he's going to come into the outside, like, you might stab, right? If I close like this, you're going to stab. If I close like this, you're going to come to the outside. What do I do? The answer is, you block everything, right? And the way you do that is you go, oh my God, who is it? Ha! No, what you do is you start with your guard center to close the inside lane when he has a chance to stab you. Because if I'm here, right, he's gonna, like, he can still stab me, but I'm gonna see it coming because I'm gonna see him do this. Whoop, right? And that's gonna be like, oh, I'm about to get stabbed. And then I'm gonna, right? So I'm going to close center lane, right? And move to outside lane, right? That also then will very often give you control of his inside lane. So what that's gonna look like then, if we're fighting, is I'm going to close, right? Notice I started in because I went here and out, right? I blocked him out, I've got center lane here, and now I've got options, right? I could go with the easy one, bit. I could go with the thing we talked about where I come back, go for an arm, or I can hit it with this arm, right? With this shot, I would probably want to go lower because there's a pretty good chance he has a good reflex to block out with that hand, right? But if I come here and I go, then there's a better chance coming in. Or just go for a free arm, right? But by starting center, moving to out, I help to close off a common way of getting in. It's not foolproof, because it could be like, I've seen you do this 5,000 times while I was watching the ditching, while I was putting my gloves on. So as soon as, I'm just going to wait, and I'm just going to be like, oh, you're closing, right? And then when I do that, right? Whatcha, right? Hopefully I will see the stab coming, right? But, because if I do see the stab coming, there's a slow motion, right? Harder, but if this is ideal, well, except for that part, then I'm good. But here, now I'm perfect, because I'm actually not going to initially throw, because if he blocks and I go, he might hook, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure he knows he's blocked, then hit him as I back out. So, center to outside is a good way to start closing.
So one thing you'll notice is he's controlling the lane. Blocking isn't just, oh, I defended against their shot, right? Like if you threw outside and I'm just defending against the shot, I didn't get hit, but like you could still bully me. You can continue to follow through. You can change that angle, go deeper, right? When Glen stepped in on me, one thing that Glen did very well was caught the block and pushed my sword out, so I did not have a good angle. And generally speaking, his hand was still in between my sword and his body, and that was really hard for me to get out because I'm going to have to probably pull away or try and shift and change my angle. It gives him some time to hit me.
And also notice, go ahead, shot again.
Let's switch sides.
Oops, we bounced off. Notice where I blocked. I block just above my hand, right? I don't want to block with my hand because eventually I'll hurt my hands. I don't want to do that, right? So we don't want to hand block, even though we got nice big gloves. But I'm blocking just above my hand. That's my strongest point. I block a little bit further of his hand, but also I've got a much stronger block because this block for me is coming in this motion, right? I am taking advantage of the fact that I'm a stronger guy because it wasn't here, it was here, right? If you were, especially if you're swinging for the fences, my blocking is a little different. It would be here, right? I still got it because I was slow. But if I'd gotten there in time, this would have blocked. So go ahead and throw that shot again. Right? Now I was fine.
And then I blow my shoulder.
Yeah. So that block then gets there. And as you said, the block's not over till his weapon leaves mine. I don't want to go boop and then take my weapon away because now he's going to hit me. Right? Maybe not, but there's a good chance.
The second part is, if you're going to close on someone, you probably should do it off of either like a feint or assault block. Right? The blocking example is like, he's already controlled the sword, now he basically is safe without risk of that sword doing anything crazy because he's controlling it. Now he's really only focusing on one of my blades to see if I'm
So one thing I just want to call attention to, if you're fighting against someone who's taller or you're taller and you're fighting against someone shorter, we were talking about closing, and a mistake that people make is I think they treat closing as if they're running a pole. As if once you get in, you're in and you want in. Well, one thing to keep in mind, just because I have longer arms doesn't mean that I can hit them when they can't hit me. Assuming we have the same weapon, which we do, if I can hit you, you also can hit me, right? And so as a short fighter, I see one thing that people do that the only option they have is to blitz in and hit someone. No, you can step back as I step in. I might start getting frustrated and overextend, and then you're going to block and win, right? I mean, it's really about making the decision on whether you want to play against someone's body or if you want to be safe against someone's arm. So a lot of people just end up blitzing in. That puts them in a threat zone. If someone blitz in, I can still back up and hit you in the body and trade. Like, that's the only difference. So don't be afraid to play a range game against someone as soon as you have the same range.
And that's an excellent point about, once you block it, you're not done, right? You notice when I closed in, I blocked and I stayed blocked, right? I didn't go, oh, I blocked back to my middle guard or whatever. I was like, nope, I've got you out here. I'm keeping these blocks in position until your swords are doing something else that I need to adjust for.
I want to add something real quick. Once you have engaged the block, you're kind of in the driver's seat at that moment. Because if you keep blocking, you're dictating to them you have to do something. Because at that point, you're blocking. If they do nothing, you throw. If they throw, you are blocking out and have control of what you're going to do.
And is that when I do this, part of the beginning is to make sure I do not get stabbed. As a Florentine, people like stabbing me, right? So when I'm doing this, I'm not just my normal guard coming in. I actually close my hands a little bit more because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to sell the idea. I am expecting you to try and stab me, so throwing a stab would be a terrible idea. You should do something else. That is the idea I want in my opponent's head, which is why when I close, I'm here. The other thing I do is subtle, my hands come down a little bit. And that is because if my guard comes down, like I'm going to hit Glen on the top, they're going to throw this shot. Right? If I bring my hands up, they'll throw down here. Right? So when I come in, a little bit down, a little bit in, and I'm trying to say, don't stab me. Right? So at slow motion, what this looks like if I'm going to step in here is I'm going to come here, come down a little bit, I'm going to come in, and then he's going to be coming out, and I'm going to come wide, right? And if the other sword doesn't come out, I'm going to leave this one here, and I'm expecting usually a lot of people go, oh, other hand now too, right? Here, now notice where I'm blocking. I'm blocking right his hands. My hands are pretty wide, right? This is me right now, right? Normally a terrible will stab me stand. I already told him not to stab me, he went outside. Now I've got complete control. Now I have a lot of options. Yeah, I've got a very strong position. He has a very tough place to throw another shot from, so I can throw whatever. For me personally, what I will generally do is I will take their sword arm, right? Their dominant arm, so I will hit with my left hand. And the reason for that is, then they're down an arm. If I try and throw both, there's a good chance one of their hands will swing at me. but I can focus on one arm and be like, bit.
One thing I do want to add real fast, like I said, the biggest thing is commit to your blocks. Commit to blocks. I know we're going through a little bit, and a couple of them it seems like it's kind of haphazard. You have to commit to the block. Once you get, always remember, we're going to keep going back to this, commit to the block, solid block, because once you get here, you have control. If you're two-stick, what you're trying to gain is control. If you're fighting a board, you have two swords, they have two-stick, a little bit different, but you're in control. That's what you want. And the foundation from your block is how you gain control.
Good. So, also important note, in my notes I forgot to say, when you are Florentine, this is the hand you're going to kill with a lot of the time, right? Because it is usually against their weaker defending hand. It's against their right hand. Most people are right-handed. So they're like, ooh, this is my, like I'm fighting him, right? They'd be like, this is my attacking hand. This is my blocking hand. If I attack his attacking hand, he's going to do a crap job blocking, right? So a lot of times I will set up with my right, kill with my left. Especially against sword. So one of the thing you'll sometimes hear is left hand is killing hand, right? That is because it's the hand you're going to be able to get more kills with, which is why we need the left hand. Take advantage of the fact that most righties are dumb, right? And so they will, if you throw a shot at their left hand, block it. Right? So here is my shot. So let's actually just do a quick round of fighting. Just fight as normal. So that is my kill a person who's a right-hander. What that shot was is I got close enough, I threw a shot at his right arm. Specifically, I threw at his hand because I don't want to go to his arm. If I go arm, he's going to be able to block, and maybe this will work out, but it's not what I wanted to do. But when I throw at his right hand, what just happened?
Opened it up.
Opened him up, exactly. His center line is now free. So it was beat to this hand, the blocky hand is done blocking. Hello, killing hand. And I just cross-stepped and stabbed, right? And maybe I get an arm, and I didn't even get hit that time, but I might get hit in the arm, but I have stabbed them. And it lets you take advantage of the fact you may have less range than them because I'm throwing into his hand, which doesn't take a lot of range, and then I am cross-stepping a step, right? This also illustrates why it's so important if you block with one hand, cover the center lane with the other. Because a way to defend against this, which most people don't do, is when I throw here, this hand comes to guard the center line, right? Because now when I go to stab, he's got an easy block out, not between his weapons. And then I get stabbed, right? Luckily, most people won't do that. Thank you for helping. So that is our first free kill shot. There are a lot of people, especially as they get better, that if you throw at that hand, they will hit you with this hand. So for example, if I do this, he's gonna do that, right? Be like, right? And notice, one, I committed a cardinal mistake. I crossed, and he's like, ooh, I hit that arm. I didn't guard this arm, I didn't do anything, right? But a lot of people will be like, oh, it's my dominant hand. Or maybe it goes the other way, right? They'll be like, oh, dominant hand, right? And chop, right? This is a very common thing Florentines do, and it's a very useful skill. If you are very quick at it, let me go ahead and throw into one of my hands. Throw the hands, my right hand's retarded, right? Really quick, right? I usually throw into my left hand. I should have been better with that, but whatever. It's actually not a block I use personally, but I've run some people who are very quick, and I tried that, and I just got murdered. But that was actually one person ever. Man, they were quick. So, yeah, I could not get back. So what I'm doing here is I'm trying to take advantage of that reflex. Not everybody will have it, but if they have it, they're really good at it, and they're probably used to killing people with it. So what you do is when you throw that, you bring this hand up, because I'm not committing to the arm. I'm not trying to get over it, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to go here, I'm just going to bounce off, come up, then chop down. So at speed, it looks like this. Should hit your own sword, though, that part's important. So, notice inside lane, arm, right? And I've taken his right arm. Probably his better arm. Now he's like, oh, I'm offhand single sword. You're like, haha, two swords.
One thing I want to talk about, if you notice his feet, as he swung, it's here. Yeah. It's not just swing and stay there. It's swing and get out. Because let's say they do catch the block, they shouldn't. But if they do catch the block, you're now even farther away, so they can't return.
Excellent, good point. Yeah. That is actually a good point to expand on that. That was excellent. Is when you throw shots, when you have like any of the things we've talked about, right? We have left out an important step, and that is leaving, right? When I close those on him, right? I do my center line close, right? I need to have a get out of dodge plan, right? I don't want to hang out here, right? So I'm gonna be like, oh, I've got my dodge out, maybe it's this, right? But notice I threw that and got out, and now I'm back here, out of range, right? If you can't do that with one strong step, take two, right? Do a cross step. You're like, well, here, and I need to get out. I can't do it with one. I'm gonna cross step back, right? So I crossed my feet. Basically, I went from here, pulled back here. Notice I'm very squared up. This is a very awkward stage. Never stop here. This is a part of a two-step motion. You're here, right? So, but getting out, right? And that's gonna apply to anything you're doing. Once you've closed, hit them, or don't if it doesn't work out, but then leave.
So, let's say 80% of the time you are going to be fighting a board. Now, if you're an AM guard, you'll do two sword a lot.
Just really for tournaments.
Just for tournaments. So a lot of the time you'll be doing board. This is basically taking all the steps we've learned, and you can modify it to a board. The only difference now is you don't have another sword that's going to hit you, which kind of makes it a little bit easier because you can manipulate it a little better. So as we talked about it, as we came in, if you stepped in, I'm going to go back to where we stepped in, we went to here. When you step in, most people are going to throw, if you're going to do this, they're going to throw to your shoulder, you're now out. From here, you're in control, you can, like we said, it's here. Or you can just do a simple cross, and now the sword is moving. You want to isolate this lane, like we talked about it, there's a center. This lane is what you need to focus on. If you're fighting it, this side cannot be anything to you. It is a,
Unless they're a torch, they're going to spin at some point.
so, like we said, one of the big issues, and it goes back to it, you step in, you here, you block out. The other thing is it goes back to left hand can be killing hand too. You throw here, you throw a block here.
Yep.
Simple torsion.
Yep.
There's going to be many scenarios. Like I said, you have two sticks, they have one. In Bellegarde, they can actually shield it, which kind of does change it a little bit of dynamic. But in most all the other games, once you catch their block, just like even with the stab, you can throw for a stab. The control, you have a little bit more control, like I said, and you have less danger on this side. So like he said, a lot of it is you want to here to here. You throw here to here. And a lot of it, if you want to get out, we talked about it, you throw here, simple step, and you create another one. You throw to your outside. And then the nice part, that everybody likes throwing out, you throw here, and move on.
Once you start punishing them on that arm game, you may just notice they treat their shield over. That's where, okay, just gonna
Yeah. One thing is you will notice a lot of people do not know the rule that the sword blocks the sword side. That is a critical rule when you're fighting a guy with two sticks. Because what will happen is they will come in, you will throw a shot up here, and Warlord knows this. Then you're not a Warlord, right? Shield blocks it, right? Now, one, that sword's going to hit me. Two, shoulder.